Chipped ham and football. That's what Pittsburgh does. Hello, everyone. Brian Batko with you, as always, from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, one of our Steelers writers. Hope you're holding up okay after the first loss of the season, Sunday in Indianapolis. But it's time to turn the page to the Cowboys this weekend, and we're going to do that with Jori Epstein of Yahoo Sports, former Cowboys beat reporter for the Dallas Morning News and USA Today, award-winning Cowboys beat reporter, actually, from the Pro Football Writers of America Association. How are you, Jori?
I am doing well, Brian. You flatter me. You've done your research. Thanks so much for having me on. Excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. Your friend and mine, Brooke Pryor, has been on the show a few times before. We're big fans of Brooke, but this is your first time. So thanks so much for joining us this week. And as always, this show is sponsored by Pella. No better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella windows and doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Okay, Jori, first off, I know you were at Cowboys-Giants Thursday night, right? Do the Cowboys have any healthy defensive players left? What is going on with this team and all the injuries that they're dealing with from that game?
Yeah, it's not ideal. They'd already been without cornerback Deron Bland early in the season. Then they lose defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence to a midfoot Lisfranc injury. He's now on injured reserve, so he definitely won't play. But Micah Parsons, their other star rusher, is also likely to be out. He's got a high ankle sprain, boot, scooter, all of the different things. And head coach Mike McCarthy said he'd be, quote, challenged to play this week, and they're preparing to play without Micah. I will say, though, for people who aren't following the Steelers all the time, when I was researching, I'm like, oh, you guys seem to be without a lot of your offensive linemen as well. And so that is kind of an interesting matchup that on one hand, the Cowboys defensive front will be shorthanded. It seems like they'll be going against a shorthanded offensive front in Pittsburgh, but it'll definitely be a chance, I guess, for some of the younger players to step up. And the Cowboys defense has just been so inconsistent this year that they really haven't figured it out, even with DeMarcus and Micah in the picture. So now the question will be, can they figure it out without them?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, obviously, the Steelers are walking wounded as well, but I feel like missing even a couple good guards, missing a couple interior linemen is a little bit different than a defense missing Micah Parsons. I mean, who are some of the guys that could potentially step up? I saw that actually former Steelers draft pick Buddy Johnson is on the Cowboys roster, but hasn't played any defensive snaps. I assume they have other answers than that.
Yeah, I mean, from a straight, like, who you would expect to flash, DeMarvion Overshone, his speed has been pretty incredible the past few weeks. Week 1 against Cleveland, I mean, he made Micah Parsons look slow, which is saying something. And then, I mean, from just like a run stuffing standpoint, their first round pick from a couple of years ago, Mazi Smith at defensive tackle, has underwhelmed since he got there, but had probably his best game yet against the Giants this past Thursday night. So guys like DeMarvion will really be who they'll be looking to, but Chauncey Golston, I mean, it's not going to be names that your fans are probably familiar with. And then the question will be if they can just get enough pressure. They do have a pretty opportunistic back end, and they'll be eager to have guys like Trayvon Diggs in the secondary try and pick a couple off and get a couple possessions back.
And it looks like Western PA native from Newcastle, Malik Hooker, is still making some plays for them, correct? So that's interesting too. What's the vibe right now overall with Dallas? I mean, is it more doom and gloom? Is there optimism that they're better than this 2-2 start? Because I know there's no such thing as apathy with that organization and fan base. It's kind of like the Steelers. It's usually one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, you start the season and going into Cleveland road game. I mean, you guys are very familiar with Cleveland and what the Browns could do and what they did last year. The Cowboys were pretty optimistic that it was not a perfect game, but to get a road win against a team that played really well last year, particularly defensively, they felt decent. And then New Orleans and Baltimore just crushed them at home back-to-back weeks. I mean, really got up on them, really exploited their run defense inefficiencies. And the Giants game was kind of a get-right game, and it was funny when I look back at my piece that I wrote after the game, having been in the locker room, having talked to players and coaches, and I wasn't saying that, oh, I think people should be optimistic. I was saying here's why they view this as an important win, and Dak called it. He said this is a 1,000% must-win game for us. Now, again, obviously easier to say after you've won than to say that beforehand, but his point was not that because they beat the Giants on Thursday Night Football, who, by the way, Dak's won like 13 straight against the Giants. His point was not that that was then going to be the elixir to getting over the playoff hump. His point was that if they had fallen to 1-3, it was going to be really hard to do what they wanted with the season. So 2-2 did make a difference. And so I think against the Giants, they said, okay, CeeDee Lamb missed all of training camp with this holdout for his contract. Well, Dak and CeeDee are beginning to find their rhythm and beginning to say, anytime we've got a one-on-one matchup, because CeeDee has had that so rarely in the first few weeks, we are going to exploit that. And they had a big touchdown on that. Okay, defensively, after a couple weeks just getting gashed in the run game, I believe they held the Giants to 26 yards rushing. And so there were definitely some inklings of here's the recipe to win if we would get there, but it was very much inconsistent. And really what hurt them most is just the penalties. I mean, I think it was something like 9 for 80 plus yards that they actually accepted, but even more were declined and offset. I know your listeners probably can't wait to hear about an opponent's penalty history.
Well, they'll fit right in with the Steelers. I mean, the Steelers are also a highly penalized team, and it hurt them at times again Sunday in Indy. So
yeah, so I really think that they've got multiple rookies starting on their offensive line in Dallas, and that has just been something where those lineman penalties have really wrecked the offensive rhythm. And so it's kind of like Dak is seeing the field well from all accounts, and then he's trying to kind of overcome the penalties to keep something going.
Yeah, I think it's probably not a stretch to say that CeeDee Lamb will be the best wide receiver the Steelers have seen to this point in the season. I mean, Drake London's okay. Michael Pittman had a good game this past weekend, but that'll be a very interesting challenge for Joey Porter Jr. and the Steelers secondary to match up with CeeDee Lamb as somebody who likes to travel with those number ones, shadow those go-to guys. So I'm really looking forward to that individual matchup. And yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the Steelers a little bit. But first, another presenting sponsor of this show, Goldberg, Persky, and White. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White. For over 40 years, their firms represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. And Jori, you made Latrobe one of the stops on your training camp tour this year. I met you out there. I know you wrote about the Justin Fields, Russell Wilson situation while you were in town. I mean, who didn't? That was kind of the biggest storyline for the Steelers all spring and summer. What do you make of this team from that national perspective, sitting at 3-1, but still atop the AFC North despite a disappointing performance against the Colts?
Yeah, I mean, look, you got to give the Steelers credit for that 3-0 start. Like, a lot of teams don't win the games that they should win, and the Steelers did. But also, I think that you saw the Steelers had some of the easier quarterbacks to face early in the season. And so I think that you really need to see, can they continue to sustain this? I think that when you look at the offensive standpoint, I mean, Justin Fields, you've got to say, had his best game this past week. Now, he had a turnover. George Pickens had a turnover. They obviously had that snap situation on the last drive.
He took a couple bad sacks too, but I mean, you've got to live with some of that, I think, because he was so prolific in that second half.
Yeah, and I wrote off them this week as well. And I think my editor and I were kind of going back and forth on the headline. And I was saying that I felt like he showed his highest ceiling in this game. And my editor was like, oh, you think he played the best? And I'm like, which I guess I said a minute ago. But I think more so, he showed that not only can he be a threat with his legs, but really he had some great passing in the second half and those 3 straight touchdown drives. The problem is, if you only do that when it's that late in the game and when you're already in a hole, are the Steelers going to be able to win? And I feel like this was the first time when Pittsburgh was really asking the offense to carry it on a week when the defense didn't seem prepared. I mean, Mike Tomlin said both at halftime and after the game that the adjustment from defending Anthony Richardson as they had prepared to do to Joe Flacco, they were just not adjusting well. And I thought that I was actually a little surprised that Mike Tomlin said that multiple times, just that he felt like they didn't defend well, and even called Joe Flacco the, quote, more proficient passer, which was amusing, at least from a national standpoint, as someone who doesn't listen to Mike Tomlin press conferences all the time. But I think you need to see, hey, can Justin Fields continue to sustain that again this week? And obviously the Cowboys will be hard pressed to go against TJ Watt. But if TJ Watt is coming on the left edge, which I think he lines most of the time, you would know better than me. Well, the right side of the offensive line for the Cowboys is much stronger. I mean, they've got a veteran in Terrence Steele at right tackle. They've got Zach Martin, who's perennial all-pro bowler at right guard. Really, the left edge, their left side of their line is where they struggle. And so, I mean, it's interesting just seeing such an elite player coming from one side, because in Dallas, they really have always moved around those guys, whether it's DeMarcus Lawrence or Micah Parsons, to exploit matchups. And I think if you've got TJ Watt coming from that left side, I mean, against the Colts, he was not super effective, and it was not one of his more penetrating days. And so I think that will play to the Cowboys' advantage.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Jory, because I had some people asking me in my chat on the Post-Gazette website Monday, like, why didn't they try to do some different things with TJ? Why didn't they add in some wrinkles? And it's like, well, I mean, generally the dam eventually breaks with him. I mean, he can get stonewalled or chipped and double teamed for much of a game. And, finally he gets one-on-one matchup and boom, strip sack, turnover, Steelers ball with a short field. And now all of a sudden you're talking about a team in position to win, but that just never really materialized for him against the Colts, who also have a pretty experienced veteran O-line, a really good, game planner and game play caller, Shane Steichen. So they neutralized him. Credit to them. I don't think the Steelers were going to all of a sudden get out of what they do and, move TJ over to the right side or rush him on the interior or anything like that. But I wonder if it's a consideration this week, given what you just said about the Cowboys and sort of where they're stronger, where they're weaker. I tend to think, even a team with a strong right tackle is not always going to have an answer for TJ Watt unless they're devoting a ton of attention to him because, he made Caleb McGarry and Mike McGlinchey look not all that good the first couple weeks. So that's going to be a fascinating, matchup to watch. They've got a second-year guy in Nick Herbig on the other side who will, he's small. He was an undersized pass rusher coming out of Wisconsin. He's going to try to dip and get under Tyler Guyton, who I guess has been pretty solid as a rookie thus far for the Cowboys from what I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing you can say about a rookie offensive lineman is that you're not hearing about him all the time and that you're not hearing that he's a bust. There have definitely been on that line penalties. And so there's definitely some things with the set and the discipline and all of that the guys need to work on. But I don't think he's this huge liability just in terms of pass protection.
When you were out in Latrobe, did you get a vibe from everybody you talked to that the Steelers were pretty high on Justin Fields? And obviously at that time, we didn't really know what was going on with Russell Wilson and his calf injury. He was a little evasive about it. And I think now in retrospect, we know, given that he aggravated it week one of practice, that it was probably worse than he and the team were letting on. Were you seeing some of what we're getting now from Justin Fields the day or two that you were out on the practice field? And are you surprised at all that he's kind of writing a little bit of a different script from everybody who thought, Chicago made the right move by, trading him and flipping the page to the Caleb Williams era out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the Chicago standpoint, you can see with the way that the line is protecting or not protecting Caleb Williams there, that Justin did not have a lot to work with. They've given Caleb more weapons than Justin had, but they still don't have the protection. And so I don't think that Justin really had the pieces around him that pretty much any quarterback, maybe outside Patrick Mahomes, could succeed. I think in Pittsburgh, it was interesting. When I came to Latrobe for 2 days, Russell Wilson was already out with that calf injury. He was kind of working back into individual drills, but definitely not team drills.
He's kind of always working, Corey. He's always doing something in uniform. I don't think I've ever seen the man wear a hoodie and sweatpants. So I think some Steelers fans or even non-Steelers fans, maybe Seahawks, especially Broncos fans, are like, what is this performative stuff this guy is doing at practice all the time? But no, I mean, I think it's more so I give him credit for trying to stay in the mix here and maybe to make sure you're not out of sight, out of mind to the coaching staff and really everybody who's kind of heaping praise on Justin Fields thus far.
Absolutely. And so I think what was interesting is thinking about what I saw from Justin Fields when I was out there during training camp to what I saw against him or from him against the Colts. I thought there was a really big development because obviously Justin's legs have been something he could threaten with for a while, but he seems to have a much better understanding of Arthur Smith's system, of the weapons that he's working with, of how to get through his progressions and reads. And I think that he's no longer just relying on his legs. Yes, his first 2 touchdowns were rushing touchdowns against the Colts, but how did he get down the field? Well, it was with deep passes to guys, including George Pickens is definitely a favorite target for him. And so I think that he seems a lot more comfortable in the downfield passing game now than when I saw at training camp. I mean, I thought that he made a couple good plays out there, but it was like the 2-minute drill or whatever you guys call the red zone, end zone situation. Was 7 something, right?
7 shots. Yeah. The goal line drill they do at the beginning of practice.
Yeah. So I think George Pickens had a one-handed grab towards, I guess it would have been the right sideline for them when I was out there. So there were a couple good plays, but it was much more like short things than it was really having to go through the progressions. And I do think that he showed a lot more of that against the Colts. Now, this offense is going to have to get its discipline down. You can't have multiple fumbles. And I mean, they were pretty lucky in terms of how little the Colts capitalized on their mistakes on Sunday, but there are teams who are going to be a lot more opportunistic, and it's going to be a lot harder for them to catch up if they keep making those mistakes. And I mean, Mike Tomlin did not mince words on that, talking about how they were too sloppy to comfortably secure the win.
Yeah. I mean, it was sloppiness from Fields, from George Pickens, but I do think, those two guys are kind of continuing to build that rapport week in and week out. Because I think, like, we saw this a lot. I mean, this was before my time on the beat, but not long before, and the quarterback was there after I started covering the Steelers. But Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown were so good at, those scramble drills, Ben buying time in the pocket. Antonio Brown's going to get open, and then all of a sudden Seven's going to see 84, and they're going to have that connection. That only kind of comes with time and building up chemistry. And I think through 4 games, you are starting to see it play out in real time, not just with Fields and Pickens, but with Fields and Pat Freiermuth, who was pretty quiet the first couple games of the season. Now he's starting to get more involved, gets that touchdown catch at Lucas Oil Stadium.
How did he fall back for so many yards?
What's that?
I think he caught the ball at the 4-yard line. It was 4 air yards and the other 4. But I'm like, he's just falling back. And I'm like, if I fall back, it's not going to cover 4 yards. And he basically did that.
That's the body control of a really good tight end, I suppose. So, and I think Pat Freiermuth was also just really, really excited to be anywhere near the end zone, because it'd been rough sledding for him thus far in this offense, either, not really designing things to go to the middle of the field, or Fields missing him the first couple of games. So they finally broke out. And then the other thing I wanted to make mention of that you brought up, Jori, was the other 2 touchdowns scored, Fields using his legs from in close. I mean, he's like a cheat code when you get inside the 10, and the Steelers have not had that. I mean, Kenny Pickett had a little bit of mobility, Mitch Trubisky even a little bit more, Ben Roethlisberger way back in his early days, but I don't know that Russell Wilson's going to give you that card to play at this point, especially if he's, trying to come back before he's completely 100% healed from, I guess we'll call them multiple calf injuries at this point, even though it was the same thing that recurred from camp to week 1.
Yeah, I definitely think also every time that Justin Fields has success with his legs, particularly in the red zone, the defenses going forward are going to have to respect that, and it's going to open up things in the passing game as well. And so that is a huge win for the Steelers. I know that when I went to the Commanders during OTAs this year to write about Jaden Daniels, the way that they described his dual threat abilities, and he's primarily a passer first for sure, is it's always a math mismatch, essentially, for the defense, because it's just a +1 of guys they have to defend, because the quarterback becomes 2 people you have to defend from the passing game and the running game. And so I think that Justin Fields is definitely showing how elusive he could be. And I also think that going in, you would think that Justin Fields has the athleticism edge on Russell Wilson, particularly at the current stages of their careers. But Russell Wilson has a much stronger resume as a passer and just being able to read the field and read defenses. But the longer this goes on and the more comfort that Justin Fields gets in the passing game and with his weapons, I do think that you start to narrow that gap. And I think that, to me, when I see even what happened on the last snap, obviously you need to be paying attention with the snap, and obviously you don't want the snap to be hitting you in the face mask and creating an unfavorable down and distance so late in the game when the game's on the line. But the way that Justin Fields took accountability for it, I don't want to give people participation trophies and just give out flowers for no reason. But I tend to think that when you have a botched snap, it's never 100% on the center or on the quarterback. There are 5 guys trying to work as one on the offensive line. There's a quarterback who's trying to do a bunch of things. So maybe he kicked his leg, as he said in the post-game press conference, or maybe he did something else and he's trying to cover for his center. Regardless of whether it's 90% on Justin Fields or 70% on Justin Fields, I think that the fact that he took accountability for that, and I know that, again, you mentioned Brooke Pryor's one of my very good friends. She was mentioning to me that in the post-game locker room or maybe on the sideline, Justin even went over to the center and was like, hey, that's on me, right away, kind of taking that off of him. I do think that it's little things like that where you call it the deposit in the bank account in terms of his leadership on this team and what guys will expect going forward if not everything goes perfect, which there will never be a game where everything goes perfect.
Yeah, I think Russell Wilson obviously is is a captain. He's the offensive captain. He walks out there for the coin toss pregame, healthy or not, active or not. But I mean, Justin Fields said it himself on teammate Cam Hayward's podcast last week that he's got a little bit different leadership style. He kind of does stuff. I don't know if he used the word behind the scenes. I'm paraphrasing, but he just kind of does it more quietly and off to the side. Not a real big rah guy. He's also the first to admit he's a little more on the shy side, not very talkative. But yeah, I mean, I too noticed him coming up to not just Frazier, not just the rookie center Zach Frazier, but all the offensive linemen after that game to just kind of, hey, good game, get them next week. And then that was their first time trying to respond to a loss together as a team after starting 3-0. So I did think that was notable as well. All right, Jori, well, before I get you out of here, anything else you wanted to add, whether it's Steelers, Cowboys, or just in general, something people can look for from you or where to find your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think it will be continued. The Steelers will continue to be a national story. I mean, they always are a national story, but particularly until Mike Tomlin officially names a starter and probably afterward, the Russell Wilson, Justin Fields quarterback competition, if you want to call that, or quarterback
controversy
situation.
Is always a good one, because I think there's a lot of people in the Russell Wilson camp corner still, and then there's a lot who are either have always been Justin Fields believers or are converting over to it's hard to give up on Justin Fields based on what we've seen.
Yeah, and I think also, again, like when I talked to General Manager Omar Khan during training camp, like I do think that there is a belief of like, hey, let's figure out what we can do for next year. Like win now, and that's the number one priority. Sure. Let's figure out what we can do moving forward. And it seems like Justin Fields is more likely to be helpful going forward. And so how much do you want to build for that while also winning this year? And as long as he is winning this year, helping them win this year, or not losing games, it does seem like he's got an advantage in terms of what he can do for the franchise. But no, I think it'll be an interesting game. It's a little bit poetic that Ezekiel Elliott is back on this Cowboys team, because it's been 8 years since the Cowboys have been to Pittsburgh, but they did have a pretty statement game in 2016. Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott's rookie year. I think Zeke kind of like split the seas and all of that and ran for a touchdown to get that win there. And a lot has happened to both of them since then. But
a lot good for Dak, not so good for Zeke at this point in their respective careers. But I don't know. You can find the fountain youth Sunday night.
They might have to have a different strategy, and particularly in the run game this week. But no, thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, my work is all on Yahoo. That's where my writing is, and we've got our Inside Coverage podcast over there as well. So thanks so much, Brian. You do great work, and I look forward to continue to reading and listening after the game.
Thanks. And yeah, 4 years ago, it was the COVID year, Steelers at Cowboys. Was it Garrett Gilbert who started for them?
Yeah, good memory. Right. Dak had broken his ankle.
But I think he came in either after Gilbert or later or something.
That was the 1 year that Cooper was not their backup in the last however many years, or not going into the season. So, yes.
And then our guy Ben DiNucci was there either that year or the year before, where
he started on Sunday Night Football.
Oh, that's right, because a lot of people here in Pittsburgh were like, are we going to see Ben DiNucci against the Steelers? That'll be a pretty awesome story. Unfortunately for Ben, and I think he would probably even say this himself, he did not play well enough against the Eagles that night to earn another start from Mike McCarthy.
Yeah, Ben's an awesome guy. He's super helpful from like a reporter standpoint. And I was at that Sunday night game in Philly and I think he had this quote that traveled a little bit when he said, like, the NFL is hard. Like, it's actually pretty hard to play in the NFL. So
yeah, I always liked Ben. I covered him, I don't know about high school, but definitely once he got to Pitt. And then, yeah, it's, he's out of the league now, but you never know. Maybe he'll come back. He was with the Bills this preseason for a joint practice.
Yeah. And hey, I mean, Micah Parsons, a lot of Pennsylvania ties as well.
Yeah, I'm sure I'd have to go back and look this up, but I'm sure Micah Parsons did some absolutely horrible things to Western PA high school teams in like state championship or
in football and wrestling.
Games. Yeah. I forgot he was a wrestler too. So I definitely remember him as a football, one-man wrecking crew. I think he played for multiple teams throughout his career. But yeah, I'm sure there are some kids here in Allegheny County. I guess they're not kids anymore, but they were kids in Allegheny County who did not have fun encounters with Micah Parsons on the field in the playoffs. So, well, thanks so much for Jori Epstein of Yahoo Sports. I'm Brian Batko. We appreciate all of you finding Chip, Tam, and football here on the Post-Gazette Podcast Network. We'll be back with you with plenty more shows, plenty more stories, plenty more coverage and content throughout the week leading up to Steelers-Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. Should be a good one. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.